Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity, an essay on exteriority, is one of the most influential philosophical works of the 20th century, offering a profound critique of Western metaphysics, ethics, and the nature of human subjectivity. Published in 1961, this work builds upon Levinas's earlier writings and the intellectual currents of phenomenology, particularly the work of Edmund Husserl and Martin Heidegger, yet it diverges sharply from them in its ethical orientation. Totality and Infinity is recognized for repositioning ethics as the foundational dimension of philosophy, emphasizing the primacy of the other and the ethical responsibility that arises from human relationships. 1. The philosophical context. Levinas wrote Totality and Infinity in a post-World War II context, a period marked by moral and existential questioning. The atrocities of the Holocaust had revealed the limitations of traditional ethical frameworks, prompting a reevaluation of the relationship between subjectivity, morality, and human community. Levinas's thought is heavily influenced by phenomenology, particularly Husserl's exploration of consciousness and intentionality, as well as Heidegger's ontology. However, unlike Heidegger, who prioritizes being, sign, and the existential structure of Dasein, Levinas critiques the reduction of ethics to ontology. He argues that traditional metaphysics tends to subsume the other into the same, emphasizing totality and self-centered systems of thought. For Levinas, this constitutes a form of philosophical violence, a reduction of the singularity of the other to the grasp of the self. 2. Totality versus Infinity. The title of the work captures its central duality, totality and infinity. Levinas contrasts these two concepts to articulate his ethical vision. Totality refers to the tendency of philosophical systems, social structures, and human cognition to absorb everything into a closed, self-contained system. Totality represents sameness, comprehension, and control, which ultimately reduce the other to an object within the self's horizon. In this framework, human relations risk becoming calculable and instrumental, where the uniqueness of the other is ignored or neutralized. Infinity, on the other hand, represents the ethical dimension of human existence that cannot be captured or totalized. It denotes the radical alterity of the other, a presence that resists complete understanding and commands responsibility. In encountering the other, the self recognizes that there is always more than can be contained within its own perspective. Infinity, therefore, is the ethical horizon that transcends totalizing structures and enables a relation of responsibility and openness to the other. For Levinas, the ethical encounter with infinity constitutes the true foundation of philosophy. 3. The face-to-face encounter. At the heart of totality and infinity is the concept of the face-to-face encounter, vis-a-vis, which is both literal and metaphorical. Levinas describes the face as the locus where the other asserts their irreducible alterity, demanding recognition and ethical response. The face is not merely a physical feature, but a symbol of the other's vulnerability and moral appeal. When one encounters the face of the other, it expresses a command, "Thou shalt not kill," as Levinas often references the biblical resonance of the ethical injunction. This encounter exposes the self to a responsibility that is infinite in scope because it cannot be quantified, traded, or exhausted. The face-to-face relationship is asymmetric. The self is called to respond without reciprocity being a prerequisite. Ethics, in this sense, is prior to equality, social contract, or mutual recognition. The other imposes an obligation on the self precisely by existing as irreducibly different. This ethical demand is immediate, non-contractual, and non-instrumental, distinguishing Levinas's philosophy from utilitarian or contractualist ethics, which are grounded in reciprocity, utility, or societal norms. 4. Subjectivity and responsibility. Levinas reconfigures the notion of subjectivity around ethical responsibility. In traditional Western philosophy, the subject is often conceived as autonomous, self-determining, and primarily concerned with knowledge or mastery of the world. Levinas challenges this view, proposing that the self is fundamentally responsible for the other. Responsibility is not a voluntary choice or contingent moral act. It is the very structure of subjectivity. The self is called into being through the ethical relation with the other, and its identity is inseparable from this responsibility. This radical reorientation subordinates ontology to ethics. The question of how to exist is inseparable from how to respond to the ethical demand of others. Levinas distinguishes between freedom in totality and freedom in responsibility. In the realm of totality, freedom is often understood as self-assertion or mastery over circumstances. In the ethical realm, however, freedom is realized through openness and response to the other. True subjectivity is found not in isolation or domination, but in the capacity to recognize the infinite demand of the other and to act accordingly. Number 5. Ethics as First Philosophy, Totality, and Infinity inaugurates Levinas's program of ethics as first philosophy. Unlike traditional metaphysics, which prioritizes knowledge, being, or the comprehension of the world, Levinas contends that ethics precedes ontology. Before one can know or master the world, one is called into ethical relation with the other. Philosophy, therefore, must start with responsibility rather than comprehension, and morality is the primary dimension of human existence. This claim was revolutionary, as it challenged the traditional hierarchy of philosophical inquiry and proposed a new lens through which to understand the human condition. 6. Critique of totalizing systems. Levinas's work is also a critique of totalizing systems in culture, politics, and philosophy. Totality manifests in any attempt to reduce difference to sameness, whether in imperialism, ideological systems, or rationalist metaphysics. By totalizing, one denies the singularity and autonomy of the other, committing an ethical violence. Levinas emphasizes that authentic human relations require openness to singularity and alterity. Ethical engagement resists simplification, abstraction, and domination. In this sense, totality and infinity is both a philosophical and moral intervention, challenging the ways in which society, culture, and thought systems can dehumanize or instrumentalize others. 7. The role of language and expression. Language plays a crucial role in Levinas's ethical vision. The face of the other speaks, even in silence, and addresses the self in a manner that surpasses empirical communication. Words, gestures, and expression become the medium through which the other's presence and demand are conveyed. Communication is not merely informational, but ethical. It is the site of responsibility and acknowledgement. Philosophy must attend to this communicative ethical relation rather than abstract, depersonalized discourse. 8. Hospitality, love, and the infinite. Levinas extends the implications of the ethical relation to broader social and interpersonal dimensions. The concepts of hospitality, justice, and love are interpreted as expressions of openness to the other. Love, in particular, is reconceived as ethical rather than purely romantic or emotional. It is the recognition of the other's absolute value and the willingness to respond to their needs. Justice arises when ethical responsibility is institutionalized without totalizing or instrumentalizing the other. Levinas's ethics is therefore both intimate and societal, addressing how the infinite responsibility toward the other can be mediated in human communities. 9. Influence and reception, totality, and infinity had a profound impact on contemporary philosophy, theology, and literary theory. Levinas's reorientation of ethics influenced existentialism, phenomenology, post-structuralism, and postmodern thought. Thinkers such as Jacques Derrida, Jean-Luc Marion, and Simon Critchley have engaged extensively with Levinasian ethics. The work also resonates with religious and spiritual discourse, particularly in its engagement with the Hebrew Bible, though Levinas presents his philosophy as universal rather than sectarian. Critics have debated the feasibility of infinite responsibility, questioning whether such an ethical model is practically sustainable in social or political contexts. Nevertheless, Levinas's emphasis on the irreducibility of the other continues to shape contemporary discussions of ethics, responsibility, and the human condition. 10. Key concepts summarized. Totality, the tendency of systems, thought, or perception to absorb and reduce difference into sameness, associated with domination, comprehension, and objectification. Infinity, the ethical horizon represented by the other's irreducible alterity, resists totalization and commands responsibility. Face-to-face encounter, the ethical encounter with the other, in which the face expresses vulnerability and moral demand. Ethics as first philosophy, the primacy of ethical responsibility over ontology, epistemology, or metaphysical speculation. Subjectivity and responsibility. True subjectivity is defined by infinite responsibility toward the other, not autonomous self-assertion. Language and expression. Communication is ethical as it conveys the other's presence and demand. Hospitality and love. Ethical response extends to societal and interpersonal relations, emphasizing openness and recognition of the other. Conclusion. Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity challenges conventional philosophical hierarchies and centers ethics as the fundamental dimension of human existence. By focusing on the encounter with the other and the infinite responsibility it entails, Levinas redefines subjectivity, morality, and human relationality. The work is at once deeply philosophical, profoundly ethical, and existentially resonant. It critiques the reductionism inherent in totalizing systems while offering a vision of human life grounded in openness, responsibility, and ethical engagement. As a seminal text in 20th century thought, Totality and Infinity continues to influence philosophers, theologians, and social theorists seeking to understand the ethical core of human experience.